Hello, you're watching TVP World News. I'm Jan Szerwiński. Officials from NATO and Ukraine are gathering at the alliance headquarters today for a meeting of the Ukraine Defense Contact Group. The attendees will include US Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, who will most likely take on an observer role at the meeting. This will be the first gathering of the group that will feature members of the newly appointed Trump administration. Wednesday's event marks the first time that the United Kingdom, and not the United States, convened the gathering in Ramstein. Secretary Hegseth, although in attendance, is not expected to present further support plans for Ukraine. Ahead of the meeting, a US official told the Washington Post that the Pentagon chief does not plan to hold separate talks with his Ukrainian counterparts and will mostly restrict his role to that of an observer. The same person told the outlet that the most important outcome of the Ramstein summit will be the American commitment to do everything possible to keep Ukraine fighting. Hegseth is expected to reiterate President Trump's commitment to a diplomatic end to the war and highlight the need for increased European leadership on securing assistance to Ukraine. Just ahead of the meeting, bilateral talks were held between US Defense Secretary Hegseth and his British and Ukrainian counterparts John Ilie and Rustem Umerov. Kyiv has once again become the target of a massive Russian attack, this time using ballistic missiles and UAVs. Our correspondent Oz Katerji has this report.
One person has been killed and 4 others wounded in a massive Russian missile and drone attack across Ukraine, targeting Kyiv, in particular with 4 Iskander-M ballistic missiles targeting Ukraine's capital city. Now, there have been 12 other reported people wounded in these attacks, bringing the toll up to 1 person killed and 12 wounded across the country, one of which being a 9-year-old girl. Now, there are reports that there are fires breaking out across the city in the districts of Obolon, Holosivsky and Solomyansky districts of Kyiv, as the firefighters, emergency services are dealing with the fallout from falling debris across the city in this massive Russian missile attack against Ukraine. So another difficult day for Ukraine's air defense, but they will feel fortunate to have intercepted 6 of the 7 missiles heading into Ukrainian territory this morning. So Oz Katerji reporting from Kyiv for TVP World.
Foreign ministers of the Weimar Triangle are holding a major meeting in Paris on Wednesday. The gathering is taking place in an extended format, with the war in Ukraine expected to top the agenda. The meeting will also center on European security. Polish, German and French foreign ministers will meet with their Ukrainian, British, Italian and Spanish counterparts. They will also be joined by a representative of the European Union. The meeting will be hosted by the French foreign minister on Wednesday afternoon. If Europe doesn't stand with Ukraine, whatever the US does, then Russia will prevail, said Scott Lucas, professor of international politics at University College Dublin, who joined TVP World this morning.
Whether they will be supportive at the Munich Security Conference, I think they'll give a very cautious statement. I think J.D. Vance is not a supporter of helping Ukraine. He's not a supporter of working with Europe, as we saw at the AI conference yesterday, where the U.S. made that disgraceful statement, working against any type of coordinated effort. I think you have to look at individual U.S. officials as to whether they continue to maintain influence. And I repeat, the 2 officials I'm watching are Keith Kellogg, the U.S. envoy, and the National Security Advisor, Mike Waltz. If they can continue to maintain influence, since they support military aid to Ukraine as part of the negotiations with the Russians, there is hope that the Americans will be constructive. If Waltz and Kellogg are pushed to the side and we have to listen to Pete Hegseth or J.D. Vance as well as Donald Trump, we better get ready to be tough. And we will need to be tough, because if Europe does not stand with Ukraine, whatever the U.S. does, then Russia will prevail.
After 3.5 years in prison in Russia, American school teacher Marc Fogel was released this Tuesday. This comes as US President Donald Trump seeks to improve relations with Moscow as part of an effort to secure an end to the war in Ukraine.
On Tuesday morning, reports surfaced on social media of a business jet owned by the U.S. Special Envoy to the Middle East touching down in Moscow. There was no confirmation on whether the envoy himself, Steve Witkoff, was aboard the plane. The Kremlin promptly denied any contact with Witkoff, stressing that Russian authorities have no plans for any official communication. The official announcement was not made until Wednesday morning that during a surprise visit to Moscow on Tuesday, U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff secured the release of Marc Fogel, an American schoolteacher detained in Russia back in 2021.
I feel like the luckiest man on earth right now. And I want you to know that I am not a hero in this at all. And President Trump is a hero. These men that came from the diplomatic service are heroes.
Both Fogel and U.S. President Donald Trump thanked Russian President Vladimir Putin for the release.
We appreciate President Putin's what he did. He was able to pull it off for you, right? He was able to pull it off. We think, and you're here.
Fogel was serving a 14-year prison sentence in a Russian prison colony after being arrested in 2021 on drug charges. He spent 3.5 years in jail before his release. U.S. President Donald Trump did not discuss the negotiations that led to Fogel's release or describe any conversations with Vladimir Putin. He did announce, however, that yet another American citizen will be released on Wednesday without disclosing any further details.
U.S. President Donald Trump hosted Jordan's King Abdullah II at the White House on Tuesday to discuss the situation in Gaza. Pressure on the Arab nation to take in refugees from the Strip has been growing, as Trump sees it as a vital part of his plan to remake the Middle East.
Jordan's King Abdullah met with U.S. President Donald Trump in Washington on Tuesday for high-stakes talks which focused on the situation in Gaza. During the meeting, Trump pressed the king to take in Palestinians who would be permanently displaced under the president's plan for the U.S. to take over the Gaza Strip.
And with the United States being in control of that piece of land, a fairly large piece of land, you can have stability in the Middle East for the first time. And the Palestinians, or the people that live now in Gaza, will be living beautifully in another location. They're going to be living safely. They're not going to be killed, murdered, and having to leave every 10 years.
The Arab country's ruler, however, said his country was firmly opposed to the move.
We have to keep in mind that there is a plan from Egypt and the Arab countries. We're being invited by Mohammed bin Salman to discussions in Riyadh. I think the point is how do we make this work in a way that is good for everybody? Right. And obviously, we have to look at the best interests of the United States, of the people in the region, especially to my people of Jordan.
Jordanian citizens have said that they fully support their king's steadfast position against the displacement of Palestinians in Gaza.
A confrontation between two wills, one that seeks a solution outside international law represented by the U.S. president and Israel, and another that strives to bring the entire Palestinian issue back to the international framework and legitimate international resolutions.
Jordan already hosts over 2 million registered Palestinian refugees, alongside hundreds of thousands of displaced Syrians. King Abdullah has made it clear that his country will not take in any additional refugees.
Polish Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski has replied to comments made by the American ambassador-designate to Poland on social media. Sikorski and Tom Rose expressed mutual respect and willingness to cooperate.
In a deleted post on his social media, the U.S. ambassador-designate to Poland, Thomas Rose, complimented Polish diplomacy and added that with Poland at the helm of Europe, he's certain a just trade balance between the EU and the U.S. can be achieved.
Thank you, Ambassador, for your kind words. Looks like we will have spirited debates on all aspects of our transatlantic alliance and trade relationship. I look forward to welcoming you to Warsaw.
Since then, however, Rose's post on X has been removed. What prompted the exchange between the U.S. ambassador and the Polish foreign minister were differences of opinion about trade between the United States and the European Union. Tom Rose, just like President Trump, believes that the U.S. is not treated fairly by many of its trade partners, including the EU. In a TV interview on Monday, Sikorski was asked about Rose's previous remarks from before he was nominated as ambassador, which seemed to suggest that Poland must choose whether it wants to move closer to the center of power in the European Union. Sikorski said that not everyone in the US understands what the EU is all about. In the deleted post, Rose responded to the Polish foreign minister, saying that there is certainly much truth in his remarks.
The leader of the German far-right party Alternative for Germany, Alice Weidel, was welcomed in Budapest by the Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban on Tuesday. The two officials are currently holding a press conference following their meeting. The AfD and Orban share some views on the war in Ukraine, rebuilding Europe's relations with Russia, as well as a strong anti-immigration stance. In the past, the Hungarian leader expressed his support for Weidel's candidacy for the office of German Chancellor and for her far-right political party.
It is well known that Hungary is the only country in Europe which, in the Russian-Ukrainian war from the very beginning, has been on the side of peace. We regard this war as a bad war, and from the first moment we recommended the isolation of this to the European Union. We should isolate it, limit it, and before it starts escalating in its embryonic form, we should make it manageable. The European Union opted for the very opposite of that, and they entered on the war path. They dug out the tomahawk and painted themselves with war paint and called the war their own war. And therefore, there's a countless inflow of very expensive arms and financial sources to Ukraine for the sake of a hopeless war. I reiterated to Madam President that Hungary is still on the side of peace, and we consider it a great historical change that the United States of America has also become in favor of peace.
And with this, we conclude this news bulletin. Please stay with us here on TVP World for more latest news and updates.